Hi, welcome to the Vivid webinar today for Smart Lifecycle Management and for SAP. Next slide. Today's presentation is brought to you by Turnkey and IntelliCorp. I'm hosting the webinar today. My name is Bernard Chimchak. I'm Vivid Ohio Chapter Leader and the TQA Special Interest Group Leader. I've been doing quality assurance for about 13 years. And next. Today's presentation speakers will be Bradley Calloway and Dave Fricko. And Brad is currently responsible for implementing, testing, and management enterprise systems throughout his career. Over the past 6 years, he has focused on helping Fortune 2000 over customers, leveraging functional test automation to accelerate application lifecycle management and delivery. He's responsible for creating a deeper awareness in the market of turnkey intelligent next generation solutions and the value of these products bring a larger QA and application development strategy. Dave is the Vice President of Business Development at IntelliCorp. He's involved with the testing market for over 8 years, focusing on testing very large ERP systems, worked with both the end user and the consulting companies to help them develop efficient test solutions and testing these very complex applications and business processes. He's led the product development efforts for software vendor testing companies. There has been experience for the lead to shift in the focus for these large test coverages to the utilization of additional technologies like smart lifecycle tools. He's got experience with these tools, allow him to focus testing only on the changes and therefore reducing the cost and time involved with testing while improving the quality of test applications. All right, next slide. All right, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. This live session is being recorded, so the recording is going to be available to all Vivid members, and you'll find that on the Vivid worldwide website. So the session Q&A, please type your questions into the question pane, and we're going to be relaying those questions at the end of this webinar. Now, if there is any questions that's unanswered, you're going to have those posted out to you on Vivid's website, so you can go there with the presentation and view them. Also, if you have any kind of questions that have to do with the tool presentation, don't be afraid to ask them, because we will get them answered for you. Next slide. Also, the webinar control panel. If you see it up there on your right-hand upper screen, you have a toggle button between the full screen mode and window mode. Also, you can minimize it by clicking the red button that you see there, the red button with the arrow to the right. And the question pane is down below. It may be minimized. Just click the little plus sign if you don't see that, and it'll open it up. And just go ahead and type your questions there. Nobody else will see your questions except for us, and then we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Next. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Dave.
Thank you. Brad, you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide? Just a quick run through on the agenda. We'll give you a little bit of background on IntelliCorp and Turnkey. We will talk a bit about the challenges in testing of SAP. As you all know, it's a very large and complex system, and why there is a real need for smart lifecycle management, how we define better quality for less, and how we arrive there. There will be a brief demo interspersed throughout our presentation today, and then we'll have time at the end for QA and wrap-up. Next slide. Brad, you want to just give a quick background on Turnkey, and then I'll follow up on IntelliCorp, and we'll move directly to the presentation.
No problem, Dave. So actually, Turnkey's been around for quite some time. We're actually founded in 1992. And in about 1995, we actually partnered with Mercury Interactive, which obviously HP purchased a few years ago. We actually were part of some development efforts to enhance what we now call UFT. We are privately held, based in Denver, Colorado, and we do also have offices in India as well. We actually have partners across the world and can see our software being used across many different continents. One of the main things I want to just say about Turnkey is actually we're built inside of HPLM. I wouldn't say we're integrated. I'm saying we're embedded. And it allows customers who are already on this technology stack to not only utilize the full capabilities of ALM, but also take advantage of the test automation solution that Turnkey provides. Really what we see with our solution is the ability to not have only technical people participate in the automation process. We're going to enable many more users within your organization to build and maintain automation. So go ahead, Dave.
And IntelliCorp has been involved in solving very challenging problems, particularly around SAP, for the past 30 years, and building great software to solve those problems. One of the real uniquenesses of the IntelliCorp products is that we produce results in less than a day. And for those of you who have been involved in testing around SAP and who've been involved with SAP, you know that not much happens around SAP in that short a time frame. We have a large number of customers across the U.S. and Europe. Just to highlight a couple of those, 4 out of the 5 most valuable brands. The largest technology companies, I can actually tell you today, are all users of IntelliCorp's, particularly IntelliCorp's LiveCompare product, which we'll focus on today, in their SAP deployments. And 3 of the top 5 oil companies, you can see other elements there. We are the first company to market with smart application lifecycle management, again, focused completely around SAP. And in the SAP marketplace, we have a 5-star customer satisfaction. Next slide, Brad.
Okay, now we're up to our first polling question. How frequently are you involved in other areas of SAP Lifecycle Management, also release management, IMG analysis, data analysis, and ADAP code analysis? So just go ahead and take a moment and go ahead and answer that, and then we're going to review those results afterwards. I know that with SAP Lifecycle Management involvement, I'm frequently myself involved with the testing organizations that we have here to revolve around that and how we can test things, with using the SAP Lifecycle Management, how we track that out within our SDLC and do things accordingly. So I don't do anything with image analysis. Do you, Brad?
I can pick that up for Brad. He's focused. So IMG analysis, SAP is a highly configurable system as opposed to a purely code-driven system. So both data and the IMG are the configuration elements that drive SAP. And over the years in working with QA teams, I've seen any number of QA teams who are much more heavily involved with their business process and configuration teams and have a much deeper understanding of the actual SAP systems than I typically see of QA organizations and QA folks in a custom development environment. So that's really what we were trying to get a sense of here, is the degree to which our audience is involved with the various different elements of SAP.
Okay, we have the results in here. Let's go ahead and see them. We show that about half of you do not do this at all yet, and then it goes down from infrequency, frequency, and consistency. So I think that's very interesting. What about you?
Yes, and that's very consistent with what I see across many of our other customers, and where the QA teams are significantly involved with much more than just kind of the testing of SAP. They are involved in any number of areas around the SAP testing, and as we go through the presentation today, LiveCompare will begin to draw out some of those additional elements. So I think now we can flip back. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, go ahead and take over doing the next slide. So
I'm sure in everyone's background, we always talk about these issues of speed, cost, quality, and risk. We prefer to use, instead of the word speed, use the word velocity. Velocity implies both speed and direction. And in the challenges in the SAP market today, understanding direction, understanding where to go test, understanding where that change is occurring, how I need to be focused is a critical part of reaching speed, cost, quality, and risk. I'm sure that many of you, if you've been involved in testing with SAP for any length of time, you've had the issue where you've done a significant level of testing, and all of a sudden during the go live, there are issues and outage issues that people are saying, why did we thought we did all the testing we needed to do, why are these outages occurring? So we will explore each of these elements as we drive through the presentation today. Brad, next slide. So we have another polling question. So here is the polling question. Bernard, go ahead.
Yep. Sure. What are the top challenges that you all face in application delivery and testing within your SAP environment? We're just going to go ahead and take a minute with this one here. So we're having some questions, some results coming in here. Go ahead and vote. This is something that I have no visibility into what our top challenges are here. But I know that some of my colleagues in other companies do face some of the challenges. So it'll be interesting to see how everybody here does. So especially when it comes to understanding what to test, that's something that I've had some from east of Ohio and one user from west of Ohio that mentioned that to me. So, okay, let's go ahead and reveal the results. Okay, wow, so some of the others have interesting responses. So understanding what to test is what we see. And then kind of like in between shortening test cycles and speed releases and keeping test cases up to date and maintained. Those seem to be, and oh yeah, not enough resources for people and or budget. Those seem to be almost tied. And then lastly, we have test tool application support. So go ahead with what you have to say about that.
So these, understanding what to test, never enough resources, these are the kinds of problems that IntelliCorp and Turnkey focus on solving. And we trust today that in addition to keeping test cases updated and maintained, when we trust today at the end of the seminar, you'll be able to have some pretty clear answers on each of these characteristics and categories. So I think with that, Bernard, let's flip back to the presentation. And today in the SAP market, as we all know, has, or the SAP application, as we all know, has been around now approaching 20 years or 20 plus years if you go back all the way back to version 2. And during that time, the application has advanced dramatically. The current view of the new in-memory database structures, otherwise known as HANA, is one of the major characteristics that is driving SAP. In SAP Change in the marketplace, we have a new major release that will come up on Fiori with new technologies and new capabilities, all continuing to drive change. And the CEO of the organization, if your organization is like ours, fast is never fast enough for the CEO, and low enough cost is never low enough for the CFO. And in all technology today, those two things combine to crush and impact the CIO. So next slide, Brad. And so out of that impact, we talked earlier about the issues of quality, risk, velocity, and cost. And understanding how those are impacted are critically important to driving an effective and solving the major issues in our polling questions that were just asked. Next slide. So IntelliCorp today will be focused on one of our products called LiveCompare. It's the ability, as its name implies, it's the ability to do analysis and comparisons of multiple SAP systems and multiple technologies that sit underneath the SAP environment. Live Model, this is our quick little commercial here, is a business process modeling set of capabilities, and while we're not demonstrating it today, when used in conjunction with LiveCompare, it lets me describe for the business process owner those things that are changing and are going to be impacted, and where that business process owner should focus their testing by looking at a business process flow as opposed to looking at a spreadsheet and trying to understand what that is. Live Interface is a technology EAI kind of product that is built into the SAP's ABAP stack. Its uses are both for standard EAI integration as well as test data management. So it is a test data management capability and can be used in conjunction with Turnkey and other test data management solutions. Live Undo is a very new product for us, and in the SAP world, when I make changes to SAP, those changes come in the form and are packaged in the form of a thing called a transport. Live Undo enables you to remove, undo that latest transport when it creates a production outage that has to be dealt with quickly, immediately, and then go rework whatever the issues are that caused it. Hopefully, with the appropriate application of LiveCompare to understand where the changes are impacted, and the use of Turnkey to have high levels of automation around those changed impact areas, the need and use for Live Undo in your environment will actually not be very high. Next slide, Brad. And so in what we all know today, and what's important to think about here in both for the IntelliCorp LiveCompare products and for the Turnkey products, we often think about impact analysis and testing as a project-driven initiative in the SAP world. Because most of the SAP funding initiatives occur at the project level, we often forget about or don't think so hard about how we use testing and impact analysis on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And I think you will find, I'm sure that many of you, if not all of you, who are participating on this webinar and supporting SAP environments have experience with customers doing daily transports. That is, they are making daily changes to their SAP environment. Certainly many customers make weekly changes and monthly changes and then major project changes. In the major project change area, you will find that that's often referred to as an N+1 landscape or dual landscape. IntelliCorp provides and LiveCompare provides a host of capabilities and solutions there to keep those in sync no matter what the issue is. And the wheel you see around SAP are all the various disciplines, audit, basis, et cetera, that LiveCompare can bring and deliver to an SAP project and to an SAP customer. Today, we are very focused on impact analysis and the ability to do testing. Next slide. And so when things are changing daily and weekly, how do we know what the impact of that change is? Well, we all know that SAP is a huge and very complex environment. And just as an example, let me show you a network diagram of interconnected links. Next slide, Brad. In this case, this is VA01. That is the T code or the transaction code used for create order. So in any company today, that is a T code that is used in any SAP environment. And what you see here is a network diagram of only 2 levels of depth. And in the 2 levels of interconnected depth of those elements within the SAP VA01 T code, there are over 19,000 links, meaning 19,000 places a change can be made that is affected. And with IntelliCorp's LiveCompare, our standard drill down functionality is to 10 levels of depth, and you can expand that to further levels, but our customers continuously tell us that 10 levels of depth is sufficient, and you can imagine the number of interconnected links at 10. If at 2, there are 19,000. So let's take a look real quickly at kind of how that process looks. Next slide, Brad. And so the object in a transport, objects come in, these objects are changing. Next, just step me through the slide. And that moves me to the implementations of these transactions, which then lead us into the implementation and the change impact of the supported business process. So I've moved from some base level piece of code called an object up to the transaction layer, VA01, and up to the overall business process layer. Now that might look like a fairly standard, fairly easily discernible approach until you understand the next view. And in the next view, we'll see how these are, how the transaction codes move across. And let's go ahead to the next slide. You see a dramatic change in the numbers of possibilities. So you have literally hundreds of thousands, millions of dependent objects that are being changed by a single transport coming into the system that changes the underlying object and affects the underlying object and then affects the overall transaction structures and affects the overall business process. This change in and of itself is one that drives the substantial need for testing, but also the substantial need to understand where and what we are testing. So let's go to the next slide and understand a little bit about how this all works. So let's impacted transactions. Then we're going to look to understand what are the used transactions. And that helps us because if you're testing SAP, you absolutely understand that I have lots of transactions turned on, but the number of used transactions and how they're used and the frequency of use. And so we're going to collect all of the information from your usage statistics. And for those of you who are deep into SAP testing, both from STO3, you get usage data, and from the new UTL data, we're also collecting additional statistics about usage to better identify specific T codes and, in fact, specific screen numbers that you can test or where you need to focus your testing. So we will move from understanding the used and impacted transactions down to the most at risk. Each level, we're reducing by a factor of 10 the number of transactions and T codes that one needs to test. Let's see how that looks in terms of the actual numbers of our customers. And this is an amalgamation across 15 different customers and a number of different hundreds of support packs that they implement so that we get a real comparison. You will notice that we analyze both custom code as well as standard code. And in this analysis, we see that the distinction between used, represented by almost 2,000 standard codes, T codes, and 1,200 plus custom codes, then when compared against those that are actually impacted, so if I don't know how something, if I don't understand what is impacted in the change, the only other resource I have to understand what is actually what I need to test is experientially, what broke last time, and what my users tell me are the things that they use the most. And from my experience now, 10 plus years in testing SAP, in the SAP world, the user community is highly siloed, meaning I'm always reminded when I was studying with a customer and the team that ran GL or FICO, as it's known in the SAP world, and SD, which is really ordering and distribution, and the procurement team. We were sitting around the table talking about testing, and the lady who runs the FICO group said, look, we test all of our systems. There's nothing in our environment that goes into production that we don't test. She said, it's those people over in SD that aren't doing an appropriate level of testing that's having a problem for us. I actually thought the guy running SD was going to, crawl across the table and have a very specific conversation with her, because his comment was, we test everything. The point simply is that in the SAP world, back to this slide that we saw earlier on the network interactions, in SAP, you don't know what's impacted and you don't know what's affected by an individual change. And the users, nor even the technology guys, really don't have any clear visibility into that. So what does LiveCompare do for you? It identifies those T codes, and now we've cut well down the number of T codes. In addition to that, we identify volumetric data. We identify nearness of the change. That is, if a change occurs 10 levels deep from a T code, the probability that it's actually going to affect the use of that T code and the testing, and therefore the necessity to test that T code and that business process is very, very low. On the other hand, if the change is very near to that, then the probability that that change is going to, that T code and that program is going to be impacted is very high. So we use a combination of historical performance metric data along with this nearness to change,
along with the ability for you as the user to identify any critical business transactions that you always want to test, and the impact analysis to define the most at risk. And now we've reduced this on average 85% of the reduction in scope. And more, I have another picture that always looms in my mind of a typical SAP project. And that typical SAP project starts with whatever the analysis is, but it's always got a targeted go-live date. And then all of the functions that go across the time horizon that we have to do to develop code, to configure, et cetera, and then we come down to sometime before go live is an amount of time allocated for testing. That's always, we call that a perfect world view. That's how it always looks when we start a project. And as we are entering that time in the project time frame to do testing, what we find is that our available amount of time to test and our number of resources to test have been dramatically reduced. And we often refer to a thing in the SAP world of post-go-live testing. And so this ability to identify and focus on those things that are most at risk based on the changes and the volumetrics of the transaction layers in the SAP system are the thing that will enable us to ensure that we're testing those things that are critical, those things that have been changed, and have a very good go-live experience. Next slide, Brad. I think I've talked through most of this, but let's go ahead and take a quick look. Just how we go ahead and advance the whole slide. Just how we look at the relation, how we identify most at risk. Again, the relationship to change. If I'm deep in the stack, I'm 10, 11 layers deep in the stack, where the change actually occurs, the probability that it's going to affect that top level is very, very low. On the other hand, if it's 2 or 3 layers down, the probability that it's going to affect it is higher. I give you the ability to control all those metrics so that you can understand that. I apply all of that against usage and performance history to arrive at, and then the business criticality to arrive at a, we pass that set of data along over to, and now we're going to spend just a minute talking about the integration with HP ALM and with Turnkey. Next slide, Brad. In our previous example, we are identifying the difference between usage and testable transactions, where we have identified that we have test cases where we've identified that they are impacted, and we see that the most at-risk testable areas have dropped dramatically. Even though we still see a fairly high level of usage, we can become very comfortable driving our testing strategy in a way that helps people and helps the management team and the SAP leadership understand that we've done the appropriate level of testing. Just one little side note, we have any number of customers who in their use of LiveCompare will take a SAP support pack or a set of transports. They run the impact analysis. Based on the impact analysis, they'll actually populate a set of stub requirements in in HP ALM. That gives them the ability to now to do testability, traceability from requirements through test cases through the test lab and actual automated testing. And we can talk more later about that as we go forward or in subsequent discussions. At this point, Brad, if you could advance to the next slide, I just want to take a little side trip into some additional capabilities around, and as we saw from the original survey, many of you are involved throughout many different segments and areas the SAP experience in testing and validating SAP. For a minute, I want to focus on the custom code area. In general, SAP would tell you that there is very little customization in the system. There's very little need customization. Our customers and others tell us that in general, the average level of customization is around 30%. That may be simple customizations where I've cloned an existing SAP program and I've made a minor modification, all the way through building out unique and complete new functionality and feature sets in custom code in either the ABAP stack or the Java stack. And LiveCompare reaches and looks across both of those technologies to identify areas of potential opportunity for improved quality. Next slide. And in those areas of improved quality, there are a number of issues. One of the issues is I've made customizations, but I no longer use them. So an ability to identify both used and unused custom code. There are any number of studies in the marketplace today that talk about the cost of keeping unused code in an SAP system. It is remarkably high, and it is the reason that business executives and management are always asking the SAP team, how do we identify and remove the unused custom code that we have? Complexity, and I'll talk a little bit more about complexity, but understanding the nature and level of complexity of the custom code, if I can see that in a very visual way, if I can understand that in a technology way. And what we've done with LiveCompare is we've implemented all of the SAP best practices, development rules written by SAP into the product so we can understand the layers and levels of complexity. As you see complexity, you see oftentimes performance issues. As complexity increases, you often see performance issues increase or the actual performance decrease. We help you understand where those layers of complexity are so you can focus and help the development teams and help the QA teams focus in on those areas of complexity. Also understanding where I have obsolete code, where there is new functionality in SAP that could replace some of the custom code that I'm currently have. Now I've pushed the responsibility for ongoing maintenance of that back to SAP. Security is one of the major issues today across all of the environments. And testing with the appropriate is always a challenge. Sure, again, LiveCompare gives you the ability to surface all of that so that you can better identify where the issues are. You can better identify where to focus the testing. And you can also look to identify the levels of quality in the custom code itself. Brad, next slide. Our technology team and our CTO particularly are fans of a certain movie series, otherwise known as The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. And so we have a quality scoreboard across custom code that, based on complexity across missing elements, et cetera, you can see the slide. We analyze all of the custom code and rank it in a good, bad, and ugly. And if you so choose, you can add who the developers are of that specific code. If you had brought in a consultant and you didn't think they did all that great of work, here's a great way to take an analysis from a QA team, having this kind of analysis, because there are always reasons that I'm going to write code in a certain way. I may need to achieve something that, based on best coding practices, is not always efficient. And so here is a way for the QA team to work with the development team to have a much better understanding of, again, where they need to focus their testing based on complexity, performance issues, etc. Next slide. And so if we link together all of the Smart Lifecycle SAP applications, we link that into HPLM for identification of test assets, gap analysis, et cetera, the ability to auto-populate the test lab, and now we're going to integrate that with test automation and pre-built test content delivered from Turnkey. We now give you a way to really map to an SAP project lifecycle, map your spending and your investment strategies along with those SAP projects, which is where the funding originally drives from. And with that, Brad, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you to spend more time talking about automation, test automation, and Turnkey.
Okay, now this is our last polling question. What is the percentage of your test execution is conducted manually? Well, that's always been a big question that every test organization that I've dealt with has wondered about. You know, they don't really have a lot of visibility across their enterprise, but they do in their individual platforms or business areas. So we're just going to go ahead and take a little bit here to answer this. So go ahead and click in. You know, I see roughly here at my current position at Progressive Insurance that we get around 26 to 50 for what we do. It's almost like a half and half, actually. So we divide things up with test engineers and software testers, and the software test engineers take care of our stuff at the more deeper level, the individual service level, whereas our software testers are responsible for taking care of the testing more at the presentation layer. Okay, I think we're about ready. Okay, we have here that's, wow, a lot of between 81 and 100%. So we got almost half the audience with that. And then it just goes down as we go up. So we don't have much there between 0 and 10 for that. You know, we have a few organizations that are mostly around 26 to 50 as well. So there we go. I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. That seems about right. You know, a lot of times the tools that are out there today for automation, sometimes it's hard to get resources that actually know how to use them. And then if it's not the right tool, maintenance becomes a huge issue where it's really hard to drive up that automation coverage. And that's one of the things that Turnkey specifically addresses, is the ability to not only create but maintain automation as you move forward, move forward over time across multiple releases of your SAP environment. You know, one of the things that Turnkey is not is a record and playback technology. I think this has been proven over time to be quite inefficient. Because you're path locking all your testing, it does require you to go into that automation code to go ahead and maintain it and really adapt it to your environment. This record and playback has driven minimal automated test coverage, believe it or not. Even though it's automated, it's very manual in the maintenance of it. And you know, it's really that maintenance that has kept automation at most companies, you know, below 25%. And then that 25% that you do have automated, it takes resources that are very technical, to go ahead and maintain it, because, you know, in the end, they're basically developers. I'm maintaining VB script, maybe Java, you know, whatever the native language is to whatever testing tool that you're using. So although these testing tools had the ability to automate, it was very difficult to not only build but maintain. I think this picture says a lot about automation. Regardless of what your tool is, when you initially implement it, things are working great. It's really cool that you no longer have to have users do your testing for you for that initial release. But what happens over a year or a couple-year time frame as I go through multiple revisions of my application, whether this be SAP or some other application, what happens is those scripts break. And typically to fix those scripts, to bring them back in line with your SAP environment. It takes someone that has a very, a technical background. And what Turnkey does is it changes that. It says, okay, I can take any resource, teach them how to not only build automation, but how do I maintain this automation over the change cycle of my application. I don't want to make a huge investment if in 2 years I'm getting no return on the investment. It's definitely not a way to go about automation. So Turnkey's developed an automation solution that gives the ability for anybody to build content. So if I think about a business process and I want to automate it, I don't want to have to be heads down typing on a computer, typing in code to be able to automate that. I want to point and click, and that's what Turnkey provides. Turnkey also provides the ability that as my application changes, I want to literally compare this content against my application. I want technology to identify how my automation has to be updated, and then automatically perform that maintenance. I also want it not only to update the automation content, I also want to update my data or how I need to enter data for a business process. So it's keeping all this in sync, automation content as well as data in sync with my application to minimize the amount of time I'm spending on maintenance. And lastly, we want to allow non-technical people to participate. I have a QA team. They're not all automation engineers. I have manual testers. I have business liaisons that participate in QA. I want to enable these people in not only the ability to create automation, but to go ahead and maintain that, over multiple revisions of my application. Now, Turnkey solution, as I said previously, is built entirely within HP ALM. And this is going to allow you to leverage your investments that you've already made. The scripts that maybe you've already created with UFT or QTP, you can continue to use if they're working well for you. If you utilize any other parts of ALM from defect management to requirements management, the whole traceability ability that ALM gives you, you can continue to leverage that. If you use Performance Center within ALM, you can continue to use that. If you use Service Test, we live inside of ALM, but do not restrict that investment that you made within HP ALM. We only enhance it. So when we look at testing in general, or SAP management of testing, that's what HP ALM does. And so we continue to leverage that as we talked about. But Turnkey plays in 3 other areas that we think dramatically increase your ability to test your SAP environment. In test creation, we provide 2 different things. We have what's called an SAP Accelerator, which is going to be pre-built content. So when you purchase the Turnkey SAP Accelerator, your time to value is going to be dramatically increased. We also provide an application called cFactory that's going to allow me to adapt that content to your SAP environment, as well as address any custom type of transactions that you run to be able to quickly build that content. Dave talked about one of our capabilities, which is to identify how your SAP environment is changing and what I need to test. That's very important. It's going to drive down those testing cycles and allow you to test what's important within your SAP environment. Turnkey addresses change management from an automation perspective and is going to be able to compare your automation content against your SAP environment and automatically update it, reducing the cost of ownership of your automation, therefore allowing you to drive up your automation coverage of your SAP environment. And then the last thing that Turnkey provides is a data-driven architecture. If we think about VA01 and creating a sales order, there's many different ways that I execute that transaction code. I don't want to create a test case for each and every one of those different iterations, or do I want to apply application logic to my automation or code to handle all those different scenarios. Turnkey has a platform and a solution that allows you to create one test case for VA01 and then allow users, by how they fill out data sheets, drive how that transaction is actually executed. And this is all done without writing a single line of code. And this is going to, once again, drastically reduce the maintenance of your automation. It's going to be a common theme throughout this webinar today. So we're going to look at each one of these different quadrants, if you will, test creation, change management, and test execution, and show you exactly how Turnkey addresses these different areas. First thing I want to talk about is test creation, and I've talked about Turnkey as a product, if you will, called the SAP Accelerator. And you're probably thinking, well, what is that? Well, Turnkey has SAP systems in-house. We've used our own product called cFactory, and the C in cFactory stands for component. And what we've done is we've walked the majority of transaction codes within SAP and built out a component library that we store directly in ALM and can deliver to you. So when we think about all the different application screens, say within the VA01 transaction code, we're going to use cFactory to build a business component for that transaction code, and we're going to be able to deliver that directly to you. We actually take that a step farther, and we assemble these components into test cases. So we take VA01, for example, and identify all the different application screens that it takes to execute that transaction, and we assemble that into a test case and store these test cases within the test plan of ALM. And that's what the SAP Accelerator is. It's the pre-built business components as well as assembled test cases. And the reason why we build the Accelerator, let me go back up. The reason why we built the SAP Accelerator is that SAP is a very vast application, very large. Although building this component is very simple, building these test cases is very simple. If I had to do it all by myself, there would actually be quite a bit of implementation that I would have to go through before I could realize the value of the Turnkey framework. This is really going to accelerate our time to value. I mentioned cFactory a couple times. Really what cFactory allows me to do is to create automation content without writing a single line of code. And this is a tool that we can put in really anybody's hands with a little bit of training, and they can build automation content. Then with a little bit of ALM training, you're able to actually build automated test cases. And we'll see how this works here shortly, but I literally click on screens to be able to build these automation components. This is just a little bit of animation that shows you exactly how it works. I do want to mention that although today's webinar is about SAP testing and change management, since we're built upon the HP ALM tool stack, we can actually automate with cFactory any application that's supported by HP. So this means that if I have a mainframe application that integrates with SAP or some custom web application, I can truly build that end-to-end business process because I can build test cases in other applications as well. Some of the other tools that are out there for SAP testing are very specific to SAP and don't have the ability to automate many different types of applications. The way in which cFactory works, as I said, is you click on screens. So these are different application screens in my business process or different SAP windows. I'm going to click on those, and cFactory is going to automatically build a business component, really taking all the technical stuff out of building content. These are building blocks for my test cases. These are stored directly in ALM, so I save these in ALM. And then with HP ALM, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop these into a test case. I'm going to provide them data, and now I'm going to be able to go ahead and execute my test case. Really, when you think about it, you know, people used to look at creating automation as a very difficult task. Creating the content anymore is very, very simple. I don't mind introducing automation earlier on in a cycle, in a project, because the creation and the maintenance of it is so easy. I think if you look at upgrades and you know, applying you know, support packs from the vendor, we used to like to get it all implemented, all configured, and do testing at the very end. You really need to rethink that. We can introduce testing much earlier on in the process because the creation and the maintenance of that automation is so much easier. And here, once again, with the SAP Accelerator, with the fact that we deliver cFactory, we really accelerate your time to value. You're going to use LiveCompare to understand what you need to test, and then you're going to be able to quickly build that automation using the Turnkey platform in a very, very short time frame based on the pre-built content and cFactory's capabilities. So next we're going to go to test execution. One of the things that I mentioned before is, you know, we look at a business process literally as a test case. I don't want to have 25 test cases that test the VA01 transaction code. Or generically speaking, if we look on our screen today, I have a process that probably everybody's familiar with, which is creating a requisition. Within Turnkey's methodology, what I'm going to do is create a master test case. Okay, so I'm going to basically create components, or we're going to pre-deliver all the components to you that cover each and every application screen that I may go to or may want to go ahead and execute. Turnkey has an internal technology that we call Data Driver. And what Data Driver allows me the ability to do is execute different test scenarios within a test case. And this ability gives me to execute what I want, when I want. Okay, so, you know, for the first test area, I might want to test this subset, which creates one type of requisition. And the next test scenario is going to test a different type of requisition. And this can all be done by how I enter data into our data sheet. Once again, if we look at traditional automation solutions, the way in which this is handled is I either record all these different scenarios and have a test case for each of the different types of requisitions that I might want to create, or more likely what you're doing is you're adding application logic to your automation, which means you're duplicating functionality both within your SAP environment and in your, say, UFT scripts, and that's how it's handled. We do this through technology, what we call Data Driver, which allows me to control how I execute a specific test case. Just to give you a quick little sneak peek at what our data sheets look like, they're actually built in Excel, which are very user-friendly, take literally no training because just about everybody we deal with who uses our product has already been, you know, somewhat trained in Excel. And the way they're broken down is if we look at our left-hand side, you know, we have built a test case, which is the assembling of those components, which represent the different application screens, say, within VA01. Each one of these of very user-friendly and really help us drive automation coverage by defining different data scenarios. So just to go through a few key facts about, you know, the webinar today, you know, Turnkey provides the ability to test your SAP environment, but really you need to be worried about what you're testing. Even with automation, it's impossible to test everything. So you really need to identify what you need to test, and that's why we partner with IntelliCorp to provide this integrated solution between how the change is impacting your SAP environment, and then how can I quickly build and then keep that automation in sync with my application as I go through multiple revisions. LiveCompare is also going to do a code analysis. And so you want to make sure you're following the rules that have been set forth by SAP to make sure you're compliant and you don't end up with code that is very, very difficult to maintain. You also want to be you also want to have the ability to introduce testing and reduce those testing cycles. So we can add automation earlier on in projects, and as you make right turns during that development process, we can quickly maintain that automation. And I think the next bullet point goes through that again. We can develop components very early on in the development process, literally allowing you to be much more agile. And then, you know what, when it comes to building automation, it's very, very simple. And then our Excel workbooks are handed to business users because they know our business process, and they're able to fill out these data scenarios. And I think what's important across both LiveCompare and Turnkey's SAP Accelerator, that includes cFactory, one thing that you never heard us talk about is the need to bring in developers, hire very technical automation engineers. This is a solution that you can put in people's hands, and they'll be very, very productive given you know, a limited amount of training. So that's what we have for you today. I do want to open it up for about, I know we're right up on the hour, but I do want to open it up to some questions. Maybe you've been typing questions in over the last hour. Bernard's going to read those out, and then either Dave or I will answer those questions.
Okay, it looks like we have quite a few questions, so we got a little bit more than what we can answer in the time that we have, but just to let you know that the questions and answers to those will be provided on the Vivid website. So if we look at them here, we got one for David. How does LiveCompare work with custom code?
Yes, LiveCompare absolutely works with all of your custom code, and in fact can help you determine areas in SAP where you could migrate custom code back to standard code.
Okay, now kind of on the same subject of LiveCompare, can you run tests from it?
No, we actually don't run tests. That's the reason we're partnered with our good friends at Turnkey, so that the combination of the two products together can deliver you a level of automation that is highly focused and that you can run executable tests from your HPQC environment.
Okay. Now, along with LiveCompare still, how much effort is required to get LiveCompare up and running?
So LiveCompare installs on a Windows Server box in about an hour and a half. We load transports in the SAP environment, and in less than a day you have results. So very, very quick.
Okay, great. Now, not to hammer LiveCompare, we'll do something different here. Can you use any other data source other than Excel, Bradley?
Actually, no. So our data management system is based off Excel. We build those workbooks for you and allow you to pull data scenarios in from external data sources, but that only works if we use Excel to store our data.
Right, and Brad, that question may have also been pointed at LiveCompare, because LiveCompare can use other data sources to pull data into your SAP analysis. So we have two answers here for that question.
Okay, great. And to you, David, can you tailor the impact analysis to focus on business critical objects?
Yes, you can. Very, very simply and very easily. We make that a significant component of your most at-risk transaction analysis.
Okay. And the last question that we're going to ask here is for you, David, again. Do you use Solution Manager and DPCA to identify the impact analysis?
No, we don't. The technology that LiveCompare uses for analyzing the technology used for analyzing impacted changes purely that of IntelliCorp. We have a very different approach than the BPCA approach and the Solution Manager approach, and we invite the audience to investigate those approaches further.
Okay, great. Next slide.
Looks like we have one more question for Brad. Are we closing out, Bernard?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and close out here if you want to put it to the next slide. Okay, we do have HP Discover Las Vegas 2015 coming up on June the 2nd through June the 4th of the year at the Venetian Resort in Las Vegas. So it's just roughly about a month and a half away. All members can register now via the unique Vivid website, Vivid link. And if you do so, you'll take that $17.95 cost down to $14.95. So you save $300 on that. And also, just to let you know that Vivid is pleased to offer deep dive sessions again at HP Discover in Las Vegas. These sessions will allow you to hear real-world implementation experience and examples from practitioners who are in the field solving business problems in HP software tools every day. These sessions will be held the day before HP Discover begins. So it's going to be on Monday, June 4th, and it's going to be in the afternoon from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. The conference attendees will be able to sign up for these sessions as part of the HP Discover conference registration. You can find more information on the Vivid website under the Vivid training sessions. Now, if you do happen to go to Discover, make sure you stop by the Vivid desk. because we got a really good good set of people there. Okay, next slide. Okay, I want to take an opportunity to thank our presenters, Dave and Brad. They did really good. They provided us a lot of deep information today. And in the short-term survey that you're going to get when this closes out, you can opt in for more information from Turnkey and IntelliCorp. So we have a couple websites there, Turnkey's website, IntelliCorp's website, and Vivid Worldwide website. And just a reminder that the recording and the slide deck will be posted on the Vivid website. In the next few days, you're going to receive an email for those links. Okay, I want to thank everybody for observing today. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.